Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to the conference. I am Matteo. I am a student at the University of Turin. And first of all, I would like to thank the Center for American Studies for giving me the opportunity to present this topic, this issue that always interested me, but most importantly, that always encouraged me and and left me with many questions. So today I'm presenting to you Reaganomics. Well, of course, people, contemporary people nowadays brag a lot about how about the accomplishments of Reaganomics, but as you will see, you will soon realize that all the gold is not all the glitters is not gold. Okay, so Reaganomics refers to the neoliberal economic policies promoted by the United States of American President Ronald Reagan during the 80s. And Reaganomics used to be called by the opponents as supply side economics, trickle down economics, or voodoo economics. While Reagan and his advocates used to call these policies free market economics. Okay, so Reaganomics is based upon four pillars, which are reduce of the growth of the government spending, the reduction of the federal income tax and capital gains tax, the reduction of government regulation, and last but not least, the tightening of the money supply in order to reduce inflation. So now, just a little bit of history. We all know that before the Reagan administration came into power, the United States of America was facing such a hardship. It was a decade of high unemployment and incessant high inflation, and it also enhanced stagflation. But in fact, during President Nixon, wage and price controls were phased out, while with President Jimmy Carter, it started to phasing out price controls in petroleum, while it created a Department of Energy. So stagflation was caused by a 3-year contraction of the money supply in order to, by the Federal Reserve Board under Paul Volcker. But this process started in the last years of Carter's presidency, and most important, by long-term easing of supply and pricing in oil during the 1980s oil glut. Now, moving on. Okay, so now we'll ask the question. About what Reagan did about it. So, of course, Reagan was believed in free market economics, so it wanted to lower taxes, and this approach was seen as a departure from his previous predecessors. So it ratified lower marginal taxes and also income tax codes, and kept on going with this deregulation. Well, now we're going to see a comparison of Reagan's presidency in the preceding 8 years, because, well, if you can, as you can all see, during the 8 years of presidency, the annual deficits averaged 4.0% of GDP. Now, GDP is the acronym for gross domestic product, and this compare to a 2.2% average during the previous 8 years. The gross domestic product per employed person increased at an average of 1.5% rate during the Reagan administration, compared to the average of 0.6% during the previous 8 years. The private sector productivity increased at an average rate of 1.9% during Reagan's 8 years, compared to an average of 1.3% during the preceding 8 years. And last but not least, federal net outlays as a percent, they grow, they average 21.4% under Reagan, compared to 19.1% during the preceding 8 years. Of course, Reagan gave justifications about these policies. Okay, now I mentioned that Reagan believed in free market economics, and while campaigning for his presidency in the 80s, Reagan stated that his economic proposal, of course, consisted in a return to the free enterprise principles, free market economic, and these were favored before the New Deal and the Great Depression. Well, you can see also a quote from from Arab scholar whom Reagan cited as an influence on his supply side economic. Now, okay. So his most important now, where at his most important policies. Well, the most important tax. Okay, so now we have in August 1981 the oil windfall profits tax, which lowered in August 1981, and it ended it in 1988. So this consists in a higher tax rate on profits that ensue from a sudden windfall gain to a particular company or industry. The other tax of 1981 is the Economic Recovery Tax Act of 1981, in which it lowered the top marginal tax bracket from 72% to 50%, and the lowest bracket from 14% to 11%. Maybe the most important, well, is the Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act of 1982, also known as with the acronym of TEFRA. So this is a federal legislation passed in 1982, and it consisted in cutting the budget deficit through federal spending cuts, tax increases, and reform measures. The legislation reversed some elements of the Economic Recovery Tax Act of 1981. So I mentioned it before, and it's also known as with the acronym of ERTA. So nowadays, it remains the largest tax cut in the United States of in American history. Now, with the Tax Reform Act of 1986, Reagan and the Congress sought to simplify the tax system by eliminating many deductions, reducing the highest marginal rates, and reducing the number of tax brackets. Now, moving forward, of course, his policies produce results. This is just an overview before looking at the specific results per field. So the spending during the years in which Reagan was in power averaged 21.6%. It is roughly tied with President Obama for the highest rank among any recent president, and each faced a severe recession early in their administration. Now, to be more specific about the different fields in which Reaganomics produced results, we have, first of all, employment and wages. So under the Reagan administration, the job growth averaged 168,000 per month against 260,000 for Carter, 55,000 for Bush, and 239 for Clinton. While the unemployment rate averaged 7.5% compared to the previous 8 years, which was of 6.6%. And the hourly wage for production continued to decline since its start in 1973. The gross domestic product growth, the real gross domestic product grew over 1/3 during Reagan's presidency and over $2 trillion increase. Can you believe it? And the compound annual growth rate of the gross domestic product was 3.6%, of course, during Reagan's presidency, while in the previous 8 years, consistent in 2.7%. Well, gross domestic product per capita grew 2.6% under Reagan, while in the previous 8 years, it grew to 1.9%. Okay, so the income and wealth, median household income grew at a compound annual growth rate of 5.5% during the Reagan presidency, while it grew to 8.5% during the preceding 5 years. Okay, and what about tax receipts? Now, both the Reagan administration and CBO forecast that a Reagan tax cut would reduce revenues relative to a policy baseline without them by about $50 billion in 1982, and even more in 1986 with to $210 billion in dollars. And the fact that tax receipts as a percentage of gross domestic product fell following the Economic Recovery Tax Act of 1981 shows a decrease in tax burden as a share of gross domestic product and a commensurate increase in the deficit as spending did not fall relative to gross domestic product. Oh man, I'm running out of time, sorry. So what about the federal income tax and payroll tax? So during the Reagan administration, fiscal year federal receipts grew from $599 billion to $991 billion. And this consists in an increase of the 65%, while fiscal year federal outlays grew from $678 billion to $1,144 billion, and this increased of 69%. I'm sorry, there was an increase of 69%. While the size of the federal government, well, we can say that the federal government's share of gross domestic product increased of 0.2 percentage points under Reagan, while it decreased 1.5 percentage points during the preceding 8 years. The number of federal civilian employees increased 4.2% during Reagan's 8 years, and this is compared to the 6.5% during the preceding 8 years. Okay. Now, the income distribution, the top 1% of income earners share of income before transfers and taxes rose from 9.0% in 1979 to reach the highest peak of 13.8% in 1986, before falling to 12.3% in 1989. Well, it's a 1% share of income earners of income after transfers and taxes rose from 7.4% in 1979 to a peak of 12.8% in 1986, before falling to 11.0% in 1989. The bottom 90% had a lower share of the income in 1989 versus 1979. Now, what's really shocking about Reagan administration and what's the most shocking thing is the party level, in particular related to homelessness, which increases a visible problem, especially in urban center. So as you can see, party level increased from 13.0% 1980 to 15.2% 1983, but it declined back to 13.0%. Reagan here stated that basically it stated that that homeless people make their own choice for staying out there. Nothing in his beliefs that there are shelters in virtually every city, and shelters here, and those people still prefer out there on the grades of their or the loan to going into one of those shelters. Then he also put a blame on the ACLU, which is the acronym for an human rights activist organization, which is American Civil Liberty Union. He put a blame on them because a large proportion of the homeless people are mentally impaired, and this is a result of the lawsuits by ACLU and similar organizations. That's it. Now, in conclusions, of course there are two sides. One side still support and admire Reaganomics, and the others doesn't. Well, the other doesn't, and so we have here some opinions, in particular by the Catalan Institute, which is a libertarian think tank, and it says that aid on the 10 key economics variables examined. Well, they thought that American economy performed better during the Reagan years, during the previous years, and of course better in the post-Reagan years. For example, they said that the family income grew by $4,000 during the Reagan years, while it experienced a loss of almost $1,500 in the post-Reagan years. Milton Friedman stated, well, Reaganomics had 4 simple principles: lower marginal tax rates, less regulation, restrained government spending, and non-inflationary monetary policy. Though Reagan did not achieve all of his goals, he made good progress. Well, Bill Mayer stated Ronald Reagan came from show business, like his idea of how the government should help the homeless was like your agent. We'll try to get you work, but don't bug us about it. So this was the conclusion of the presentation. I hope you guys enjoyed it and learned something new, something different, and maybe I hope you just have seen Reagan from a different point of view. And like I mentioned before, all the glitter is not gold. Thank you very much, and thank you for Center of American Studies for giving me the opportunity to deepen my to know more about this part of American economics and history. Thank you.